I still remember the caption that ruined my wedding. The best days are spent with the people who truly matter. It wasn't printed on an invitation or spoken in a toast. It was written beneath a photo of my mother and sister smiling at a rooftop hotel bar while I stood in a chapel surrounded by empty chairs. The sunlight poured through the stained glass windows, soft and merciless at once. Beside me, Daniel's hand trembled slightly. A quiet echo of the storm beginning inside my chest. The planner whispered that we could delay the ceremony. Daniel leaned toward me and said he'd call them again. His voice tight but gentle. I nodded, pretending calm, though each unanswered ring felt like proof that love had limits. When he returned, shaking his head, I already knew the truth. The seats reserved for family would stay vacant. Like open wounds no one intended to close. A friend's message arrived on my phone, Morgan. Is this your mom and sister? I opened it and saw them in glittering dresses. Champagne in hand. The caption mocking everything I had believed about belonging. My reflection blurred on the screen. Pale and foolish under the veil, Daniel looked at me and asked softly, What do you want to do? I said only. Proceed. The minister hesitated, glancing toward the silent aisle. But I stood taller beneath the weight of my gown. Everyone here came for love. I told the room, That's reason enough. My voice did not break. Though the air felt colder, the vows were exchanged. The guests clapped, and I smiled for every flash that pretended the day was whole. Inside, I understood something final. The people who truly mattered were already here. And none of them shared my blood. After the guests left, I sat in the dressing room, still wearing the gown that had lost its purpose. Daniel stood behind me, his voice quiet but steady when he said, You don't have to pretend. Morgan. I met his reflection in the mirror and answered, I'm not pretending. I'm just closing an account that should have been settled 5 years ago. The words came out calm, like a financial statement already audited. And for the first time that day, I felt the balance shift. The silence between us carried the weight of numbers I had never said aloud. My mother's mortgage, my sister's tuition, the endless emergencies that somehow always ended with my bank login. I told him. Every month I transferred $1,800 without fail, $1,500 to her, $300 to my sister, and still they called it love. He exhaled through his nose. Not surprised, only saddened, and said, They built a system, and you kept it running. I nodded because he was right. I had been their infrastructure. I remembered the night my mother cried over the phone, saying, Do you care more about money than your own family? I had believed helping her meant being good. That paying meant belonging. Now the memory felt clinical, like reading an expense line that should have been written off years ago. I told Daniel, They don't see people. They see sources. I was never a daughter. Just reliable income. His jaw tightened. And he said, Then stop financing their fantasy. When we reached home, the air felt new, thinner, cleaner. I opened my laptop, scrolled through the contacts list, and paused at their names. Deleting them didn't feel cruel, it felt necessary. Like removing old clients who refused to pay their dues. Daniel asked quietly. Do you want me to stay? I told him. No. This part is mine. I need to end it myself. I spent the evening drafting a short note to the property manager, requesting a lock change. The words looked professional, detached. Exactly how I wanted to sound. When I hit send, I whispered to no one in particular, The transaction ends here. It wasn't anger or revenge. It was a closing statement. The next day would begin with a new ledger. And for once, every entry would belong to me. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning, its subject line reading, Current and Wonderful News. I opened it, half expecting an apology, though I already knew better. My mother's message began with celebration. Riley is engaged to a wonderful man, and we're hosting an elegant engagement party next month. The tone shifted fast, like it always did, to numbers and need. After final estimates for the venue, catering, and her dress, she wrote, "We're short about $2,500. This is an important investment in Riley's future and, by extension, in our family's future. Naturally, I trust you'll handle this as our family sponsor." I read it twice. Each sentence a familiar invoice disguised as affection. Daniel noticed the stillness beside him and asked, "What's wrong?" I turned the laptop toward him, the cursor blinking like a metronome over her signature. "They want me to fund her engagement party," I said, keeping my voice even. He frowned, his hands tightening around his mug. "After your wedding, after what they did," I nodded. "They think family works on direct deposit." He leaned back, anger creeping under his calm. "What are you going to say?" I stared at the email, feeling the strange lightness that comes only after the last straw breaks. "Nothing more than they've earned," I said, my fingers already moving. I typed a single word, "Congratulations," and pressed send. The click sounded final, cleaner than any goodbye I could have written. Daniel studied me for a moment, as if trying to measure what had changed. "You look calm," he said quietly. "Are you sure you're done?" I closed the laptop and answered, "I'm not done. I'm beginning." He didn't ask what I meant, and I didn't explain. Some endings, like certain debts, are best settled in silence. The locksmith arrived the next afternoon, and I watched him work without speaking. When he handed me 3 new keys sealed in plastic, he said, "These will make the old ones useless." I thanked him, hearing something ceremonial in his tone, as if he'd just declared my independence. Daniel asked later that night, "Did it feel strange?" And I told him, "No. It felt like reconciling a ledger that's been wrong for too long." At my desk, I opened the banking app that had defined half my adulthood. 2 automatic transfers blinked at the top of the list. L. Carter, $1,500 monthly. R. Carter, $300 monthly. My hand didn't tremble when I clicked stop. The screen warned, "This action cannot be undone." And I whispered, "Exactly the point." Daniel leaned against the doorway, his voice low. "That's years of conditioning ending in one button." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the blank recipient field. "It's the cleanest kind of closure," I said. 24, and irreversibly. When the confirmations appeared, I closed the laptop and let the silence fill the apartment. Daniel crossed the room, unsure whether to celebrate or comfort me. "You're quiet," he said, and I answered, "Because it's done. For the first time, there's no balance due." He smiled, small and cautious, the way people smile when they realize someone they love is stronger than they thought. Later, as I brewed coffee, the air seemed lighter, almost foreign. "Strange," I said, handing him a cup. "How peace doesn't make noise." He laughed softly, saying, "You make it sound like an audit." I looked at him, not joking at all. "It is one," I said. "The lock, the transfers, every habit they built. I'm auditing my own life, and everything that doesn't belong is finally written off." The buzzer screamed through the apartment just after breakfast, sharp and relentless. Daniel looked up from the paper, and I said quietly, "It's them." On the screen, my mother's face filled the frame, her lipstick uneven, her expression twisted with fury. Riley stood behind her, arms crossed, shouting, We know you're in there. Morgan, open the door before we make a scene. I didn't move. Daniel whispered. You don't owe them this. I kept my eyes on the monitor and said, they never understood boundaries. Let's teach them what one looks like. The pounding started next, each thud shaking the floorboards. My mother yelled, How dare you change the locks? After everything we've done for you, I spoke softly. More to myself than to her. Everything you've done was a transaction. Not love. Riley's voice cracked through the intercom. You can't just cut us off like some utility bill. I almost laughed, but didn't. That's exactly what I did. I murmured. Daniel asked, Do you want me to call someone? I shook my head. No. Let them exhaust themselves. Parasites always do. The noise escalated, their voices layering over each other, pleading, accusing, demanding. You're ungrateful. My mother cried. You've forgotten who raised you. I answered in a whisper. And you've forgotten what raising means. Riley shrieked. You owe us. Morgan. The words hit the door like fists. No. I said aloud. Steady and final. I've paid in full. Daniel's hand brushed mine, grounding me. But I stayed silent, letting their outrage dissolve into its own echo. When the pounding stopped, a brief silence hung heavy before my mother's voice returned. Brittle and vicious. If this is how you want it, we'll call the police. I looked at Daniel and said, Of course they will. When manipulation fails, they escalate. He frowned. Are you scared I poured another cup of coffee? The sound loud in the quiet room. Not anymore. I told him. Fear was their credit line. And it's been closed. Outside, the muffled sirens began to grow closer. Predictable as debt collection. I set the cup down and said evenly, Let them come. I have the receipts. 2 officers stood at my door. One older. One new to the badge. The older one spoke first. His tone practiced. We received a report about stolen property and threats. Are you Morgan Carter? I nodded, opening the door wider. Yes. And the report you received is false. Please come in. I have the records to prove it. My mother's voice rang out from behind them, cracked and trembling. She's unstable. She locked herself inside and took our belongings, Riley added. She threatened us. We didn't know what else to do. I kept my tone even. Then it's good you came. I'd rather settle this with witnesses. We moved to the living room, where everything was already laid out on the table. These are photographs from my wedding, I said, placing the first sheet in front of them. You'll notice 2 empty seats. Those were theirs. The younger officer frowned. And the people in this second photo, I pointed to the printout. My mother and sister. Same day. Same hour. At a hotel bar. The caption reads, The people who truly matter. The older officer exchanged a glance with his partner. The kind that silently says, We've seen this before. Next. I opened a folder of bank statements. 5 years of transactions, $1,800 a month. Consistent transfers from my personal account. $1,500 to my mother for her mortgage. $300 to my sister for her business fund. I looked directly at my mother. Every cent accounted for. Every receipt attached. There's no theft here. Only dependency. She tried to speak, but the officer lifted a hand. Ma'am. Please let her finish. Riley muttered. That doesn't excuse how she talks to us. I replied. Financial records don't record tone. Just truth. Daniel stayed silent at the corner of the room, his eyes steady on me. No interference. Just quiet faith. The older officer turned each page. Methodical. His thumb smudging the ink slightly. Ms. Carter. he said finally. Do you have any evidence of threats from their side? I nodded, handing him a printed email. This was sent last week. They demanded I contribute $2,500 for an engagement party. I replied once with congratulations. Riley scoffed. She's twisting everything. She's making us sound greedy. I faced her fully. I don't have to twist it. Riley, you already did the math for me. My mother's lip quivered. You've become cruel. Morgan, I said. No. Just solvent. The younger officer looked between us, the air thick with the sound of paper being turned. From what I can see, there's no basis for your complaint, he said to them. She has every right to change her locks, to stop the transfers, and to set boundaries. Continuing to harass her could result in legal action against you. My mother whispered. Legal action against us. The older one met her eyes. Yes, ma'am. This is not theft. This is independence. They both stood there, speechless, their certainty dissolving under fluorescent clarity. The older officer handed me his card. If they come back, call us. You have nothing to fear. My mother's knees gave slightly, her voice smaller than I had ever heard it. That can't be true, she murmured. Riley looked away, cheeks burning, the word ungrateful dying before it reached her tongue. When the officers left, the door clicked shut with a sound that felt cleaner than applause. Daniel exhaled and said, You just turned your life into a case file and won it. I answered, No. I audited it. The silence that followed was absolute, the kind that comes only when the truth has balanced every account. A week later, the first call came from my aunt in New Hampshire. Her voice careful and unsure. Riley's engagement is off, she said. His family found out about the police report and the scene outside your apartment. I let the words settle before answering. Then they finally saw what I've been living with. She hesitated, asking, Do you feel better? And I told her, No, I just feel accurate. When I hung up, Daniel looked over from the kitchen. Bad news? He asked. Already knowing, I said. Her fiancé's family values reputation more than love. One public meltdown, and she became a liability. He leaned on the counter, studying me. And your mother, I opened another message. Short and desperate, a foreclosure notice forwarded by mistake. She lost the house. I said quietly. The same one I paid for. He asked if I was angry, and I shook my head. Anger implies surprise. This was arithmetic. We sat in silence for a moment that felt like an audit's closing page. Do you think they'll call you? Daniel asked finally. I said, If they do, it won't be about reconciliation, it'll be about money. And that account is permanently closed. He nodded once, understanding without comfort. I looked toward the window, the city lights reflecting against the glass. They built their empire on my compliance. I said, Now they're learning what happens when the funding stops. By spring, Daniel and I had moved into a smaller apartment near the seaport. Sunlight stretching across the river every morning. The place smelled of coffee and paper. Quiet enough for my thoughts to balance themselves. One afternoon, he found me at the desk, typing slowly. What are you working on now? He asked. Leaning against the doorway, I said, A blog. I'm calling it The New Ledger. It's about reconciling what we owe to others and what we owe to ourselves. He smiled. You're turning your life into a tutorial. I shook my head. No. Just documentation. Numbers may lie, but balance doesn't. As I wrote, I realized the tone wasn't bitter, it was procedural. Almost serene. Each post read like a case file closed, the debts paid. The accounts severed. The heart recalculated. Daniel brought me tea and said, You sound lighter lately, I told him. Because I am. The noise is gone. The silence left behind feels like profit. He sat beside me, reading a few lines aloud. Freedom starts when you stop financing guilt. You really wrote that, I nodded. It's the truest equation I've ever solved. The weeks turned gentle. I filled the apartment with small, deliberate things, second-hand books, plants that required little care. Mornings without expectation. Daniel teased. This place finally looks lived in, I answered. Because it is. I used to think survival was enough. But that was just budgeting. Living means spending what's real. He laughed softly and said, Then keep writing. I glanced at the open document, cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I will, I said. Every entry from now on will be in black ink. No red lines. No debts left outstanding. Dinner that night was small. Just Daniel's parents. A few friends, and the quiet sound of glasses touching. His mother raised her wine and said, Morgan, you've brought balance to this family. I smiled and answered, No, I just learned to balance myself. Daniel looked at me, his eyes soft. You make it sound like a closing statement, I said. It is. The audit's complete. The laughter around the table was warm, unforced. I watched the light settle across faces that expected nothing from me except honesty. Daniel leaned closer and whispered. So what's next, I said. Living without accounts to settle. He nodded, understanding the simplicity of it. When the evening faded, I stood by the window, the city lights flickering against the glass like old data being cleared. I thought of every dollar, every apology, every explanation once demanded and finally denied. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt earned. Daniel wrapped his arm around me and said, Feels like peace. Doesn't it? I nodded. Peace and profit, I replied. For once. They balance. And as the night deepened, I knew the ledger of my life had closed clean, no debts. No interest. Just truth, paid in full. Thank you for staying with my story until the end. If you've ever chosen silence over chaos, you know, it isn't weakness, it's precision. Leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I read them all. And if this story found you at the right moment, stay a while.